Really, the purpose or the goal of this presentation is to spark interest in the intersection between design and artificial intelligence. I'm going to be a bit more broad and introductory in my remarks, and not as deep, but hopefully we can kind of start a discussion here in this community. So let me talk a little bit about the title, AI First Design. This is Sundar Pichai of Google, and he recently talked about their plan to move from a mobile-first world in their technology to an AI-first world. And what he meant by that was, just as mobile has radically changed our interaction with computers, so too will AI be another radical transformation for the next era of technology. This is the basic outline of the presentation. I'll be talking about AI a little bit generally, and then talking about this concept called software agents and how software agents kind of fits in to how we can think about products as designers and product managers. So, little conceptual background around AI. When you talk about AI, most people get their conception of AI from the media, from Hollywood. AI doesn't need to be embodied in a robot form, as with Samantha in the movie Her, for example. We throw that word out, AI, or artificial intelligence, a lot, and there's a lot of hype around that word, a lot of ambiguity around that word. So let me try to give a little bit of clarity as to what kind of people are talking about. We were working with artificial intelligence 50 years ago plus, and there's a saying in the AI community that whatever we're working on now is called AI, but once we accomplish those things that we're working on, they cease to be called AI anymore. So the things that they called AI back in the several decades ago, things like object-oriented programming or voice recognition, today we generally don't consider those things AI because they're well understood computer processes. The things that we're working on now that are called AI, in 20, 30 years from now, we probably won't call those things AI anymore. So there's kind of like a mysteriousness and ambiguity around the term, where it's constantly kind of changing to kind of fit new contexts. But if you look at just the word artificial intelligence, it's kind of doubly ambiguous because artificial has multiple meanings and the word intelligence has multiple meanings. So artificial can mean something that is real but produced through artificial means, or it can mean something that is not real, just an imitation. So for example, like an artificial cream is not real cream, it's just artificial cream. And similarly with the word, with the word intelligence, we also use that word in a very literal sense and a metaphorical sense. There is a distinction made in the AI community between narrow AI and general AI. Narrow AI refers to technology that can perform some task or solve some problem in a very narrow domain, let's say like a chess program. And general AI refers to this concept that a computer program can learn in one narrow field and then generalize some concept and apply it to a different category of problems. Okay? So this is the difference between narrow AI and general AI. General AI often gets conflated with another concept called strong AI. Weak versus strong AI deals with this question of consciousness or sentience or awareness. It's not really a scientific question, it's more of a theological and philosophical question. But currently, the state of our technology is such that we only can accomplish problems in the field of narrow AI, or maybe you call it weak AI as well. Just as an example, here are some references from popular culture that relate to this lower quadrant here with the intersection of strong AI and general AI. And we don't have many examples in the corners because I don't think that people usually make these distinctions. And so because we kind of conflate those concepts, there's not a lot of good examples. This is from Jerry Kaplan. It's a book he wrote. It's a really good primer on artificial intelligence. He's a professor at Stanford University and an entrepreneur. And he says that the mundane truth is that the advances we're making in AI are not leading to some sort of superintelligence, a better framework, or a better way to look at it is that all of our advancements in AI and computer technology right now are trends towards more automation, advancing what we've been working on for several decades in the field of automation. And so that is a more appropriate, I think, framework for what I'm going to talk about today. If we look at just narrow AI, you can see that there's, when we talk about it, there's like several different fields and several different areas. And I'm not an expert on most of these by any means. What I'm going to be focused on today is kind of these questions. Software agents, conversational agents, chatbots, voice interfaces, things that have become much more popular in recent years. So what is a software agent? The most basic definition is that an agent is a piece of narrow artificial intelligence that can act on behalf of its user. Talking in terms of agents is more of a conceptual approach to the technology rather than a perfect description of what the technology is. It's kind of a paradigm, a way to look at the technology to frame it in certain ways that are beneficial for the people using the technology. Let me kind of make a couple other distinctions. When we talk about doing a manual task, we often talk about a manual task in terms of we have to, in the moment, be engaged with our hands or in some task that we're kind of completing the action. There's another kind of concept of narrow artificial intelligence called assistive technology, where the computer programs act sort of like an advisor to a user or a person that is trying to perform some task in the moment. So let me kind of give you a couple examples. So this is an iPhone, and this is the keyboard, and the very first release of the iPhone, it had a very tiny keyboard. And what they programmed the keyboard to do was predict what the next letter is that you would type, and it would increase the tap area of that letter so that it would be much easier for you to hit the key that you wanted to hit. It reduced a lot of friction in experiences. Similarly with kind of predictive recommendations for which words you use. These are all assistive technologies that are trying to help you in the moment, that are using artificial intelligence technology to try to predict. Another example would be the iPad Pro and the Apple Pencil. So when you're using the Apple Pencil, they've used machine learning to detect your palm resting on top of the screen in order to ignore that as an input, to make drawing much easier in the moment. Now, the difference between assistive technology and agentive technology, agentive being technology that acts on an agent as an agent on behalf of the user, is really this switch, where the user now becomes an advisor to the system, where the computer is kind of now more the decider and can act autonomously to accomplish some goals. One example is the Nest thermostat. Nest thermostat is a product that we work with here at Vivint, and it's a product that will learn the user's preferences over time, and based off of changing information, it adapts to the user to keep them comfortable and save them energy. Okay? So that's agentive technology. Automation, or at least pure automation, would be a computer just acting as decider on its own. And the word automation often kind of encompasses this discussion of agentive technology. But in terms of pure automation, there's not much in terms of progress for the field of what I'm going to call pure automation. If there was some sort of technology that was purely autonomous, it actually wouldn't be that useful to us, because having a user in the loop is always going to make the entire system, the hope is that it will make the entire system much better. And when we talk about pure automation, we may talk about things like the fans inside of your computer that are automatically turning on and off based off of the changing state inside of the computer. And that's helpful, but it's not the most breakthrough. Most of the breakthrough technologies are what I would call more in the classification of agentive technology. So here's just kind of an example of the different distinctions that I want to make. There are key agent characteristics, such as automation, adaptiveness, and cooperation. There are other characteristics of agents, but usually we're talking about the intersection of these types of piece of functionality. Underlying technologies that we use for agent of technology. In terms of seeing or receiving input, these are some examples of the technologies that you can use for the agent to receive new information. Here are some technologies where the agent can start to think or process that information. And here's some examples of things that the agent can do. They can show things on a screen, or they can output some sort of a speech, for example. The wider field of software agents includes many of these types of projects, but I'm only going to be focusing on personal agents and conversational agents. So let's talk about personal agents. Here's some examples of the promise of personal agents and what they can do. This is an example of what we're working on at Vivint. We have multiple sensors in the home, probably more sensors than any other smart home company. And we have devices in users' homes where they can keep themselves comfortable, make their lives more convenient, and make their lives more secure. And we use the information from the interaction of all of those devices in order to sense whether the home is occupied or not, and whether people in the home are asleep or not. And that way we can automate their devices in such a way to keep them comfortable and make them more convenient, save them time, etc. Autopilot. So agent of technology can do the work that we're not good at. We're not very good at enduring or like intention heavy kind of tasks, especially tasks that are complicated and require attention for long periods of time. And we use technologies such as autopilot to compensate for some of those human weaknesses. It will do the things that we're unwilling to do. This is a company, or referring to a company called ShotSpotter, and they've gone into densely populated cities and put microphones on the tops of buildings. And what they can do is they can triangulate the location of a gunshot firing. And people in these neighborhoods are nervous to be seen as a snitch. And so they're very grateful for this technology that can alert the police to a problem without them having to take that on themselves. It'll help us accomplish goals with minimal effort. This is narrative camera. Narrative camera is a little camera that you attach to your shirt or your backpack, and it takes pictures automatically for you throughout the day. And at the end of the day, it will gather all of your best photos and present them to you. And you can teach it, you can tune it and say, oh, well, I really like this photo, I don't really like that photo, and it learns over time and gives you better recommendations of all the photos that it takes for you throughout the day. The Roomba vacuum helps keep our house clean automatically. It's very nice. Self-driving cars. So agent of technology really has the potential to transform our cities. A lot of companies are working on sort of a autonomous car technology, and the expected transformation from autonomous cars is huge. It's as big as the way that cars transformed our economy and environment 100 years ago. Just as an example, when cars first came out, it created a completely new industry, namely the restaurant industry. People didn't really go out to eat so much, but cars introduced that new industry and really transformed the way people lived. There are companies that are working on smart traffic lights that will help driving become more safe and efficient by detecting the cars coming towards the light and either shortening the time of the yellow light or lengthening that time. And if you're in more of a nefarious city, they would change those times in order to get more traffic ticket revenue. But if we truly get to a place where we have self-driving cars then that are all connected and aware of each other, then we may even get rid of traffic lights completely. So here's an example of what it would look like going through an intersection with self-driving cars. So it'd be an amusement ride every time you go through an intersection. Let me talk about a couple of challenges to personal agents. When you start talking about personal agents, our first thought is to take some task that people are doing, make it autonomous, and then replace that task. But in the history of studying autonomy and agentive systems, what's happened is that agents change the nature of the task itself and create new tasks for the users to do. So just as an example, if you asked your 5-year-old to start to do the dishes, you're not just handing the task off to them. You've changed the nature of your task because now you have to monitor them, make sure they're safe, make sure they're doing it correctly, and if they're understanding the process. Narrow artificial intelligence currently is that 5-year-old. And we need to think about these in terms of a system, not just in terms of product tasks. And when we do that, we find that we need new types of notifications and alerts to help keep the users aware for these new tasks that get created because of autonomy. One consequence could be overdependence, or is overdependence on computers. Pilots that have relied heavily on autopilot have lost a lot of practice in actually flying. And so the Air France Flight 447 that crashed in 2009, this was pointed out after they did a study that the pilots had everything they needed to save the flight from crashing, but because they were out of practice, they were not able to assess the problem in time. Overdependence from Wall-E. Another problem is that when you start to make systems more adaptive and more autonomous, the information becomes opaque. It becomes difficult to kind of understand what is the system really trying to do. And so for that, it can be a challenge to kind of give users a peek under the hood of the car, metaphorically speaking, to kind of see what's going on so that they can tune the agent for whatever problems that they need. A lot of people talk about agentive technology or artificial intelligence as replacing the screen, replacing the graphic user interface. But at the state of technology now, we will need these interfaces in order to do these sorts of tasks with agentive technology. Setting up, having everything kind of run smoothly, addressing problems, and disengaging. Most of the effort, if you were working on these projects, will be in trying to solve the edge cases and trying to handle exceptions. And if you're interested more in this, I recommend this book, which just came out the beginning of this month, Designing Agentive Technology by Christopher Nossel, who is someone that I've talked with and had a lot of discussions about, and it's a very good book where he gets very detailed into how to solve a lot of these issues. Conversational agents. With conversational agents, there's really two types of technologies that, or products that we're talking about: voice interfaces and chatbots. In terms of voice interfaces, these are popular hardware offerings from Apple, Google, and Amazon. Here are what's called multimodal interfaces, where you talk about voice control as one modality among many, and the user experiences that have a combination of both some graphic user interface and a voice interface are very successful in helping users accomplish the tasks that they want. And this is my favorite example of a multimodal interface. Messaging platforms are very popular. Messaging platforms now have more users than social networks. And messaging platforms such as Facebook, Wechat, Skype, and Kik are all ways that companies are introducing chatbots as a way to interact with users. Wechat is particularly interesting. This is a company in China, and a lot of the trends that are being started in China with Wechat are coming to the West. They kind of have skipped over email and have gone straight to this sort of conversational interface, which is very interesting. 20% of all Google searches are done via voice. So it's becoming much more popular to use. Most people say that they use some sort of voice interface for a hands-free and eyes-free type of a situation. You're either cooking or driving, things like this. Most people are also using these in the home, followed by in the car and on the go. As of right now, it's a little bit weird to be talking to your phone at work, so most people don't do that with other people listening. I want to talk a little bit about some of the factors behind the explosion in conversational interfaces. There is machine learning, which is technologies that have made voice recognition much more accurate and has made the sound of a synthetic voice much more natural. And so that has made people eager to try these interfaces more than they have in the past. Tiny keyboards have really driven the usage of voice interfaces. It's a lot easier for most of us to say something on our phone rather than to type it in on a tiny keyboard. And so we usually will try to say something and we'll use the keyboard to fix our mistakes. That's a very common usage. Platform envy. So this is talking about companies like Amazon and Facebook. They don't own their own sort of platform OS like a phone, Google or Apple. And so they're trying to develop platforms where they can own some of the users and kind of balance out some of the competition from Apple and Google. And the start of a post-app era, this is referring to the fact that people tend to, after they buy their phone, they download a couple apps on it, and then most people never download any app again. So here's just some of the stats. It's average of 2 apps per month for other users. But most people just don't download apps anymore. And so businesses are struggling to get in front of users' eyeballs. And so they try to do that. They're trying to do that by going to where the eyeballs are. A lot of studies are starting to show that people just don't want the friction of kind of download an app and set up an account, things like this. 45% of all time is spent in the user's most favorite app, probably Facebook. 84% of time is spent in the user's top 5 apps. So users are spending more and more time in the apps that they're already comfortable with, and they would appreciate a new piece of functionality in that app they already use instead of having to download a brand new app. So for a lot of people, the messaging platforms such as Facebook Messenger are kind of becoming like a second home screen for a lot of people. And so using a chatbot or some sort of conversational interface to get in those places is the strategy that a lot of businesses are taking. What are the promises of conversational interfaces? I mentioned one already, hands busy, eyes busy situations, where you're cooking and you want to kind of not have to use your hands, or when you're driving, for example. Serving users with physical impairments is a huge promise of these, especially voice interfaces, where people who are vision impaired can be told what is on the screen of their phones, etc. It's quicker than the alternative. Like I said, it's often easier to say something to your phone rather than to type it for a lot of people. It reduces the friction of connecting with a business. This is Mark Zuckerberg at the Facebook conference last year saying, we think you should message a business just the way you would message a friend. Really reducing the friction out of kind of connecting with a business is the hope. Also, chatbots don't judge. A lot of interviews and surveys done with millennials say that they would prefer to actually give their information to a chatbot because there's no awkward judgment of things like income or other sort of pieces of information that you would give to a company. And also, this is talked about a lot in developing countries, minimizing data usage is a big problem that people want to solve. And if you can just have an interface that already exists on people's, let's say, chat interfaces or their messaging platforms, like a messaging app, for example, it can get value to them without them having to use up expensive data to download your app. Some of the pitfalls. I like this bag from a chatbot conference last year. just understanding, just having a conversational interface understand what the user's trying to say is a big challenge. Lots of context, lots of understanding, and it's very frustrating when we have to repeat ourselves over and over again to one of these interfaces. Even to other people, we tend to think that they're either stupid or they're just messing with us. So that frustration comes out in our technology as well. A conversational interface generally has higher cognitive load. That means it's more difficult for us to kind of think and be engaged in these interfaces. Our brains have evolved to kind of understand visual input much more efficiently than abstract symbols such as words or auditory sounds. When you have a voice interface, your memory becomes the UI. You have to remember what you can say and how you can say it. This is an example of visual voicemail, which was introduced with the iPhone. And the experience went from a voice system to a graphic user interface. And for those of you who remember, this transition was so much easier to use voicemail when we made this transition, when they introduced this feature. The functionality is really difficult to discover. When you have your phone, you see all the little app icons on your screen, and you can remember, oh yeah, I have that app. Oh yeah, I can do all these things with that app. It's very easy to discover when you can see it in front of you. But with a voice interface, there's no affordance that you can see to remind you of all the functionality you can use. So when trying to promote discoverability of new features on these systems, they'll often give you a list. Siri, for example, gives you a list of here's all the things you can ask me. But in the moment, in the context, you're not really, the likelihood of one of those being exactly what you want right in the moment is low. So it's difficult to have new discovery. These voice interfaces are adding more and more features, and they're adding more and more integrations and more skills. But really, the more features that you add, the more the user has to remember. So the hope is that it makes the experience better, but it ends up being it ends up not kind of fulfilling the promise because your memory is the UI in these cases. There's also inflated expectations, and our psychology is such that when we talk to a phone or one of these other voice interface devices, and we immediately hear it respond to us, our psychology immediately expects there's a little person inside of that device. And so when we ask it something and it doesn't understand, we can become very frustrated, much more frustrated than if we were to interact with another human being. In fact, studies have shown that when you rig the system so that a piece of technology and a human kind of produce the same exact rates of error, people rate the human as far more trustworthy than they're much more forgiving of the human than the machine. So one thing that you can do to try to resolve this is to try to set expectations up front as clearly as possible. So here's an example of Slack. And Slack used to say, Slackbot is pretty dumb but tries to be helpful, as a means to set these expectations very clearly up front. Creepiness has also been an issue with these systems. This is an example of a chatbot that was created by Intercom. And the designers tried all sorts of things to get the users to like it. They made it more brief, gave it more personality, and they found that really only one thing helped make people like the chatbot, and that was removing the first person pronoun I and removing the name as if it was talking to itself. And so they've kind of encoded this in their principles for designing chatbots. Similar studies have been done for several decades and have found similar effects to the user experience. What this is called, kind of making computers have more human-like attributes, is a general term called anthropomorphism. Anthropos means human, morphism means kind of in the form of. And anthropomorphism is kind of a go-to design approach every time we have new technology kind of introduced to us. So just an example of anthropomorphism is Clippy, a famous example. It's funny, there's a story where a researcher at Stanford named Clifford Nass tried to find a way to make Clippy likable. And so what he did was he had people use Clippy, and Clippy would come up and interrupt you and say, see that you're trying to write an email. How can I be helpful? And then it had a little text at the bottom that said, was this feedback, was this prompt helpful? And if you say no, Clippy would say, that makes me really angry. You got to tell Microsoft how bad their support system is. And so it would pop up an email where you're writing to Microsoft, and then Clippy would interrupt again and say, no, you could do better than that. Let them have it. And people loved Clippy, but they hated Microsoft. This is someone that I've engaged with. He has written a very famous textbook. His name is Ben Schneiderman. And this is an answer that he gave me to a question I had about anthropomorphism. And he's been studying it for a long time, several decades. And he says, anthropomorphizing the user interface is an old design idea that has died many times, but like a bad zombie, keeps returning. This is the book that he wrote, 6th edition. I highly recommend it. He has a section on non-anthropomorphic design in the book. Another thing that people find kind of uncomfortable with voice interfaces is if they try to advertise to them. So recently, through Google Home, they started to play ads for Beauty and the Beast. And people were not very happy. They didn't like that intrusion in their homes. So masquerading for third-party promoters is something that can undermine trust in any of these systems. So this is the last section. Really the future of software agents. There's really two futures that you can explore. One is represented in the movie Her, where the main character has basically an earpiece and only talks with one agent, and the agent has all of his information coordinating it for him. The other world is Star Wars, where users really interact with dozens of agents, and they maybe even hire an agent just to be a translator for the other agents and robots that they're talking to, right? In the future of Star Wars, there's no one dependence on any corporation, which is a good thing, but the information would be more fragmented. And if any of you have more than one voice interface, you know it's frustrating to call it by its right name, just like with your kids. So, hey Alexa, I mean Siri, I mean okay Google. Okay, these are all these are frictions that get involved when there are multiple agents. But if it's more like the movie Her, then our dependence on a single corporation that provides that agent would be high, but the user experience would probably be much smoother. There would be they would have more integrations with your data and be able to provide more value to the users. Some more information if you're interested. I can give lots of articles and books. Here are 5 that I think are very interesting that talk about these issues. The book in the middle, Software Agents, was written by one of my mentors. He wrote this book 20 years ago, but it's still on the MIT bestselling list. And some of the technology is out of date, but the principles of psychology and interacting with these products still apply. So I highly recommend that. And if you want access to the slide, there's a link right here, and I thank you for your time. So, fielding questions? Yes?
What's your opinion on Elon Musk's fear of AI?
All I'll say about that is the media will find the most sensational quotes from Elon Musk and present those instead of presenting perhaps a more nuanced view that he has. And so I think that we should kind of go to the source and just be wary that it's in the media's incentive. They have incentive to make it sound much more sensational than perhaps it really is. But if you want, I love it. It's an interesting discussion. I'm happy to talk more about it, but maybe after. Yes?
So is your sense that we're going to converge more towards voice interfaces, or that we're going to continue to have these varying and hybrid multimodal approaches?
I think multimodal approaches are really the future. There will be some instances where voice-only experience is the best, but most experience, because of the problems that I discussed, will involve some sort of screen to tune the agent to kind of remember kind of what the agent can do. So I think that voice will definitely be one modality among many. I don't think that it's going to replace graphic user interfaces. Yes?
What's your current favorite voice interface that you use?
Well, I use Siri, and I use Alexa, and I like the sound of Alexa's voice better. I actually have the male voice for Siri on my phone, and I have higher expectations for Siri, so I'm more frustrated with it than Alexa. Yes?
One question just for the audience. How many people are currently using some type of AI in their products? So it seems like I'm working for a smaller company right now, and so it would take a lot to hire up to be able to support it. Do you have any recommendations for when to make the decision to start really looking into AI?
I don't think I'm really qualified to understand. I think that a lot of factors would have to be, are in play there. Size of the team, budget. If what we see other companies doing is like a sign of what's to come, then I would say you should be aware of what's going on in the industry. Be aware of the types of technologies. They're becoming. My understanding is they're becoming more and more available, more easy to use, especially like open source kind of versions of these systems. I'm not an expert though on actually the implementation of the technology.
So aside from personally, which ones do you like using? Are there any third-party implementations that you like that you have found where it's kind of AI as a service?
I'm not prepared to answer that question actually. There is a AI starter kit that is promoted by A16Z. This is Andreessen Horowitz, a venture capital fund in Silicon Valley, and I may start there as ways to start looking at how to start. But as far as that goes, what's that?
What was the name one more time?
If you look up A16Z starter kit or AI starter kit, you could find some more information that may be useful to you. Yeah. Yes?
So maybe I just comment a little on that one too.
Yeah.
When you start looking at AI, that's just a really broad term, right? And so there's a whole bunch of different components. And it seems like when you start looking at how can technology, data science, and otherwise help my product, the biggest problem is trying to figure out which technology is going to be the best one for you. Is it some kind of a streaming technology, or is it a database, or whatever? There are consulting companies that can help you with that. There's a group called, what do they call it? You can catch me afterwards, I can tell you, but there's a group up here in Salt Lake that does just that. They come in, talk to your company, see what your problem is, what you're trying to accomplish, and say, oh, here's the technologies that will work for you. They can do it, or they'll teach you guys how to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes?
So you talked about how you mentioned a lot of interesting things about user expectations, like, for example, when you anthropomorphize the user interface and you increase user expectations. Have you read anything or any studies about users expecting intelligence in products? Like, has there been like a mass market increase in expectations for products to have some level of intelligence?
No, I haven't read anything that says that specifically. I think that any time that products are marketed as intelligent or smart, or those sorts of words are used, those seem to bring expectations with them. But as far as like a general expectation, I haven't read anything conclusive or specifically related to that. Yes?
So it seems like there's a little bit of fear as we move into this world of the her, right, where there's just one platform and they kind of control everybody's access. I mean, so
Yeah.
What is their motivation to allow us to get our software into their platform and some other things? Is that a fear? I mean, I think it's interesting as Facebook, controls and starts to get bigger and bigger
Right.
as far as the interface. How do we get involved and try to get things into those platforms, or I don't know?
A few thoughts. I don't know that I'll be able to answer your question directly, but starting out with a very narrow offering with something that with some sort of functionality or value that is currently not being offered by these larger companies, I think would be a way to start. It's interesting because you can think of technology in general is just having a big trend towards consolidation. Just think of your phone, your iPhone, or your Android phone, for example, and how many technologies has that replaced. And when the iPhone was first out, for example, people would create apps for light to control the flashlight on the app, and then those sorts of functionality just get integrated right into the OS and kind of undermine that whatever companies were making those apps. So if you could do something that didn't have a very strong value by being integrated with other services, you probably have less competitive pressure in that sense. Hopefully that helps. Yes?
So there wasn't much discussion of like privacy and security in this space, but like this is kind of a large problem. So for example, when you take like the Google Home or the Alexa, this has to record your voice continuously, and it develops a training corpus based on all the speech that takes place in your home. But like, and you know when you have large sensor networks inside your home, and that's always recording information, so that becomes available to hackers. Or so how do you design around these security concerns?
Well, we currently integrate with Amazon Echo, which is the Alexa voice interface, and Amazon claims that they do not record or capture any conversations that go on until the user says the wake word. The wake word is Alexa. And so once they hear that one word, then they can use that information to accomplish that task in the moment, and then they throw away anything else besides that interaction. And so they're trying to focus on privacy in this way. But there are several security concerns that we've talked about and thought about here. So if you have, for example, a voice kind of user interface that's connected to your front door, and you say, Alexa, open my front door. Well, could someone just come around the window and say, Alexa, open the front door, and then get into your house? So you can't allow for those types of situations. I can't speak much more to, I think, what Vivint is working on, but Google has been working on actual voice recognition in terms of their Google Home can recognize the voices of 6 distinct users. And using the voice as one level of security among many has a lot of promise, I think, for addressing some of those issues. I think you're right, it is a very big problem, big issue. Privacy concerns are definitely one example of a privacy concern that was kind of funny was a Burger King advertisement where inside of the ad they say Google Home, Google Burger King, and then their Google Home would start to spout off the Wikipedia article about Whoppers or whatever, right? And so I think that people will get used to that, and that may be a deterrent to having it on all the time or things like this. Yeah. Yes?
Are there any reliable studies on how our dependency on AI features and agents are actually changing cognitive behavior because of that dependency?
There's one book, in terms of cognitive behavior, there's one book I can think of called Age of the Infovore by Tyler Cowen. And he says there are a lot of organizing cognitive behaviors that the internet in general has kind of strengthened. So in that particular book, he kind of makes an interesting case, giving autism as an example, where it's one cognitive profile that has many different strengths, but also cognitive weaknesses. And the types of strengths that are present in a more autistic profile tend to be amplified for non-autistic people through the use of kind of information technology. That doesn't directly go to AI specifically, but just information technology in general. That's kind of the best, I think, example I can think of off the top of my head. But maybe I could look into it more. Thank you. Yeah.
So I'm sure that with all the research that you did, you're probably thinking, maybe dreaming of artificial intelligence possible pieces of products or features that would rise or in the future will have, what is some type of artificial intelligence that you kind of like hope existed or you're looking forward to?
I'm really looking forward to an artificial intelligence product that will make me not have to ever type in my password again. Some type of a service that will recognize that it's me based off of my movements, based off of my voice, based off of whatever, and I'll just use my products without having to type in passwords. Really hoping for that to happen soon. I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much.